Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar discussing the new cut score recommendations for the GED test. Today's webinar will be led by C.T. Turner, Senior Director, State Accounts and Government Relations. Before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. First, we have a big crowd today, so everyone will remain muted for today's call. We will be taking questions at the end via the question panel on your webinar screen. So please type in any questions you have in the questions panel. We'll answer as many questions as we can in the time allotted. Also, we have the PowerPoint for today's presentation available for download in the handout section on the right side of your webinar screen. So you're welcome to download and follow along. And finally, we will be recording today's webinar and it will be posted on our website for you to review again. So now I will turn it over to CT to start the presentation.
Great, thank you, Mimi. My name is C.T. Turner, as Mimi said. I'm a Senior Director here at GED Testing Service. And for those of you who may not know me, I've been working with GED Testing Service for a little over 8 years. And my team works specifically out in the field with adult educators and specifically more closely with the GED administrators and state adult ed directors and some policymakers in your state. So with that, I'll go ahead and launch it. So today we're going to talk about the overall recommendations on the 3 new performance levels, or the 3 performance levels, and then also about retroactive scoring. We'll talk a little bit about that, and credentials. Then we'll spend some time talking about the high-level timing and implementation. We'll talk about some helpful things to counsel adult learners. We'll do a wrap-up, and we'll take some time for Q&A. I do want to spend a little bit of time at the beginning around the recommendations on the performance levels. Instead of just giving you the performance levels, I want to take a bit of time, give you an overview, talk to you a little bit about them, and give you some insight, and then talk specifically through each of the 3 different levels and what they mean, and then we'll spend some time on timing and implementation. I will say that it's difficult in a webinar like this to really get into too much detail at the state level because things vary significantly by the state level. I think I'll make a good attempt at that today, and we'll try to break things into a couple different categories. And then there are a lot of resources on the website which I'll talk about. We'll able to take your Q&A at the end, and then we'll also have an email box that you can send communications to as well. So first off, let me just stop and say I'm very excited to chat with you all about this today, about this new update and new set of recommendations. This is the data-driven decision. As you all know, access to computer-based testing has been a real benefit in a number of fronts, and one of those is really the ability to look at data almost in real time, be able to make any kind of enhancements and adjustments. And we've already done those sorts of things in the past. This is just another one of those enhancements, and we'll continue to work with you all, state leaders, researchers, and other folks to look at that data about test takers and performance data and continue to make improvements when absolutely needed to help benefit adult learners achieve what they want to achieve, help them on their career pathway. So about the scoring enhancements, we have at least 18 months worth of data that we've been able to look at and really assess adult learners and their knowledge, and we're really looking at this in terms of a spectrum of a typical graduating high school class. So you walk to your main street, you find your local high school, you look at their class, and you say, okay, there are different types of students that are getting a diploma, but they're at different stages, they can demonstrate different skills, and they're prepped to do different things. So really what we're doing is we have 3 performance levels now that can measure that full spectrum of a typical graduating high school class. There are those who are meeting the basic minimum graduation requirements. They're graduating, they're earning a diploma, and they're on their pathway to whatever they want to do next. We also have high school students who are on the college prep path. They're getting ready to enter college, and they've gone through a set of curriculum that's really going to prepare them to be college ready. And then we have another level of adults in high school, or excuse me, students in high school that are maybe in dual enrollment. While they're working on their diploma, they're enrolled in, say, a local community college, or maybe they're taking an advanced placement course. So they're actually working on earning college credits or earning college credits while they're working towards their diploma. And so this infographic gives you a clear description between where we are on the left with the test at the 150 level for passing or high school equivalency, and then the 170 placeholder for GED with honors, which is the first college ready indicator when we launched the test in January of 2014. Now, if you look over at the right, you'll see the 3 performance levels that we're now recommending for the GED test. And the first one you'll notice is the passing standard set at 145 instead of 150. The second level, GED College Ready at 165. This in essence replaces GED with honors now that we have performance level data, other research, and credit recommendations, which I'll talk about here in just a minute, at the 165 level. A new additional level is 175, which we're calling GED College Ready plus credit, and that's I think there's a lot of excitement about that one, and that's a brand new level I'm going to spend a little bit of time in talking about. So why recalibrate the passing score? We want to make sure that we are accurately measuring what a typical high school student is doing and what's reflected of that typical high school graduate. 150 has been working particularly well for adult learners. They're doing well in the next step. Every indicator is that they're doing things a little bit better sometimes than their K-12 counterparts. And we want to make sure that we're reflective of what's happening in high schools and what a typical high school graduate can do. And we're not necessarily leading the curve on that because we don't want to expect more of a GED graduate than we do of a typical high school student. And so we want to make sure that all of the folks that are in that spectrum of that typical graduating high school class, all of them earn the basic credential and are able to go on to that next step. We also have some data back. And so, of course, we did a norming study. We looked at graduating high school seniors in the spring of 2013, and that's how we set the passing standard at 150 for the GED test. That's the way we've traditionally done that on the GED test, and we really didn't have data for years and years, and by the time we had data back on the performance of those graduates, we would have already started a new test series almost. And so one of the benefits of computer-based testing, plus the access to data that's now available through places like the National Post-Secondary Student Clearinghouse, state-level data, where the systems are starting to talk together much better to look at what adult learners are doing in terms of jobs or in post-secondary. We've started to gather that data back. We can look at the actual performance of our population, not just rely on graduating high school seniors. We can look at benchmarks and performance data from adult learners themselves. And so that's what this is a reflection of. It's a reflection of looking at the data that we now have available and making informed decisions to recalibrate things as needed. And so a couple of things I'll just point out, data points that we've been using in this analysis, is that one, a higher percentage of GED graduates than ever are going on to post-secondary programs. And when I say post-secondary programs, I don't necessarily mean 4-year, I don't necessarily mean bachelor's degree. I mean any kind of post-secondary, whether that's going to take a few classes towards a career certification, or whether that's for some kind of credential out of a 2-year institution, or whether it could be a degree. So that's a very good trend, and we see that more GED grads are going on to do that. And then another data point that's been coming in anecdotally for a number of months, and then recently, in the past 3 or 4 months, we've been getting hard data sets back from particular states showing that GED grads aren't just performing on par with their counterparts with a high school diploma in remediation, in post-secondary. They're actually performing better, and sometimes far better than those counterparts. And what I mean by that is when a student goes, they apply to their local college or community college, they're either put in remedial education or they're placed in credit-bearing college courses. And so what we're finding in many states is GED graduates are bypassing remedial or non-credit-bearing college courses and being put directly into credit-bearing college courses at higher percentages than traditional K-12 students. And so just to give you one example of that, this is courtesy of the Higher Education Coordinating Commission out of Oregon. So this represents all of the higher learning institutions in Oregon. And just quickly, if you look where I put some red circles down here, you'll see that in the 2014-15 school year in reading and writing, traditional high school students on the right needed remediation at the rate of about 48%. And if you look at GED earners, that was around 15%. For math, 62% or so for recent high school graduates, and about 40% for GED graduates. So just another indicator of some of the data that had come back about informing this recalibration of the passing standard itself. So the passing standard change from 150 to 145 will make sure more people can benefit from the program, be prepared for that next step, and that the program can be even more inclusive and even more valuable to more people. Moving on to the next two performance levels, GED College Ready and GED College Ready Plus Credit, which is 165 for the first, 175 score level for the second, just as a reminder. GED College Ready is basically a replacement of GED with honors, and we have that recommendation from the American Council on Education's College Credit Recommendation Service, that their recommendation to institutions of higher learning and to community college and higher education systems as a whole is that someone who reaches that GED College Ready level, they're recommending that they be able to bypass their entrance exam when applicable, because students just demonstrated on a high stakes test what they're capable of doing, and we have data about what skills people are demonstrating and are mastering on the GED test. And then also to put them in credit-bearing college courses as much as possible, and not put them needlessly sometimes into remedial education. So that's an important step to create a closer coupling between what adult learners are doing and then encouraging them and fostering them to get started in these college and career training programs that most of them are going to need to actually get the jobs that they say they aspire to. The next step is, or excuse me, the next level is a completely new level. It's called GED College Ready Plus Credit, and the Plus Credit piece is pretty exciting. So what this means is students who score 175 on any of the GED test subjects will be eligible for college credit hours. If a student receives 175, for instance, across all 4 subjects, they'd be eligible for up to 10 college credit hours. And if you see the breakdown here, that's 3 in math, 3 in social studies, 3 in science, and 1 in English or language arts or humanities. So that's pretty exciting for a couple different reasons, but again, as I said earlier about encouraging more GED grads into these programs and giving them a bit of a jump start, this will really give them a jump start because they'd have up to 10 credit hours possibly waiting for them, and that will really jump start their education. Some of the other benefits of these 3 scoring levels is that we are recommending that states consider strongly retroactively scoring and awarding credentials. So what I mean by that is if someone took a GED test since January 1st of 2014, say they did that in February of 2014, and they received a score of between 145 and 149, so they didn't meet 150 in the past in February when they took that test, but let's say they did get a 147 across all the subjects, or at least greater than a 145. Then what we're asking is the state to consider looking at that and then awarding that person a credential based on their score of over 145 when they took that test. So if that happens, and again, this is a state level decision, and any states that do that, that student would be automatically eligible to receive that state's GED credential and consider passing the test. So that means a lot of people having access to credentials pretty quickly who are really close. There were a lot of people, if you all have looked at the data, a lot of people are within that 5 point, 7 point, somewhere in that range, especially on math. So this will be a real jump start and a good surprise, I think, for many of them. The GED test itself remains fully aligned to the state college and career readiness standards. So I've heard a couple questions already about this. If we're moving the standard passing score from 150 down to 145, are we dumbing down the test? Are we doing anything with the test itself? And the answer to that is emphatically no. The GED test remains exactly as it is. We're still going to continue to measure those critical thinking and problem-solving skills that are so important for today's jobs and then also for college and education training programs. What we're doing is we're putting the standard at a level, allow more people to access it, and is reflective of what's happening with your typical high school graduate. So the test itself remains fully aligned. I already talked about, did this last bullet, I want to make sure and point out, we did an analysis just to see how many test takers have reached that 175 level, because these higher score levels, the 175 especially, is through the ACE Credit Recommendation Service, and so it is automatically retroactive to anyone who would have earned a 175 on any of these 4 tests since January of 2014, regardless of whether a state issues a credential or not retroactively. Independently, those folks will be automatically eligible. So how many people does this impact? 10%, or 1 in 10 of every single GED test taker since January of 2014 has earned a 175 on at least one subject area or more. So again, if someone has 10 credit hours possibly waiting on them, that's a real jump start in their education, especially with our population, because 10 semester or credit hours, college credit hours, is more than most adult learners take in that first semester of any degree program or certificate program that they enter into. So that's a big bonus. So I want to talk quickly about this performance standards. We had Martin Kay, our VP of Assessment, on the call yesterday. He's traveling today, is not able to join us, so I'll be a little bit of a pale substitute, but luckily for you, all the information is available. So specifically for the performance standards, I want to point out that we do have a technical document. There's a technical manual, but we also produced a technical document really looking at the performance standard setting process. And so you can view that on the website. I have the website here, and this website's going to be a reoccurring theme because this is where we're going to have as a hub or a place to download and look at lots of information, pretty much anything you may need information-wise on the scoring changes, even some state-specific information there as well. But part of that will be this technical document. The technical document talks about the standards, performance standard setting process when we set them for January 1st of 2014. And in those documents, and to you all, we made a commitment that we would continually monitor the performance of our adult learners in terms of testing and what they were doing after earning a credential. And so that document gives some detail about that performance standard setting process leading up to January, and then most recently leading up to these recommendations. And so you can get some clear data there, or clear information there about how we've made these recommendations and some technical information. And again, that's on that website right there, gedtestingservice.com/educators/score-changes. And one thing I really want to point out here is that part of that technical document, the last half at least of that technical document, is really dedicated to updated performance level descriptors, or the PLDs. Many of you are familiar with the PLDs. If you're not familiar with them, you should become familiar with them. Because what they really do is they spell out exactly what skills are measured at and required at each of the different performance levels. So those were in existence, the PLDs, previously for the 150 and 170 score levels. In this technical document, they are updated to reflect the 145, 165, and 175 score levels. So these should be a real go-to, this should be a real go-to document for you to be able to look at curriculum or look at where a test taker is and determine what they're ready for. So I'd encourage you all to look at that. One additional enhancement we'll be making, one additional enhancement change we'll be making at the same time when we make the adjustments to the passing score. We'll be really gearing up to eliminate the social studies extended response. And so that, let me just stress, this will happen on March 1st. This is not happening immediately, although we're talking to you about it right now and sharing the information. It won't go into effect until March 1st. And so the reason that we're removing the social studies extended response, again, is related to looking at the data, being able to examine performance and what the data is telling us about the performance of test takers. And in a simplistic answer, basically we found that there isn't real sufficient additional measurement information that's coming from social studies ER. the same data is being collected or demonstrated in the RLA extended response. So really what it was a duplication. It was more time on a test that someone needed to spend that isn't absolutely necessary, because it really is being measured in other ways on the test, and specifically through the RLA extended response. So a couple benefits of that is eliminating social studies extended response reduces the test time for test takers by about 20 minutes. It actually will be 20 minutes. I think yesterday I aired and said 15 minutes. It actually will be 20 minutes. I think they had originally had 25 minutes for this item, but we're shaving off 25, so they'd have an additional 5 minutes if they want to for the rest of social studies extended response, or excuse me, social studies non-ER items. So again, that goes into effect on March 1st. And then this does not have any type of impact on the college readiness indicators, or so GED College Ready or GED College Ready Plus credit, the elimination of that. So that's an added benefit and something you all can look forward to, and one less thing to spend some extra time on for adult learners when they're testing. So now I'll take some time and talk through the timing and implementation as much as possible, and beneficial, I think, for everyone on the call, and then we'll take the Q&A. So for most states that are going to, all states have this information, all states are in various stages of implementing the recommendations or getting state approvals or submitting rule changes if necessary in their state around these recommendations. So we wanted to make sure and share this information broadly, quickly. As you all saw, as soon as something kind of leaked and information got out, everyone wants to talk about the information. And we have to be cognizant of that, because we're not in a place where we can stop testing, get all the ducks in a particular order, and then restart testing. People need to have access to this test on a daily basis. We need to make sure momentum keeps up. They have access to it for jobs, for colleges, for scholarships, all those sorts of things. So we wanted to share this information today broadly with test takers and other stakeholders, so that students can benefit immediately in the states that are implementing the recommendation immediately. And so in those states, for instance, Georgia, that was one of the first states that was out there talking about this, and they've had good conversations all across their state. But we will work with them, and we'll notify GED test takers in the state of Georgia on both of those things, those recommendations we chatted about earlier. But students specifically will get an email when they've had some kind of a status change. And so a status change may mean they moved from non-passing to passing because of the 145 passing level in, say, social studies. So they'll get an email letting them know, congratulations, you've now passed social studies, and if you have more tests to take, or whatever the case might be, this is good incentive for you to stick with it or to take the next step. Same thing for GED Ready. If they move from yellow to green in terms of status, they'll get an email about that letting them know. And then in the states that are doing retroactive scoring and credentialing those folks who have taken the test since January 2014, they'll get notified that they've met their state's requirements and should be expecting information about earning that credential. There is one state that I believe is doing that today or tomorrow. So in Texas, students will actually, I believe their credentials are being mailed out as we speak or in the next day or so. So that's happening very quickly in one particular state. For most states, that won't be the case, and I'll talk about that in a second. The other thing, or the other reason for sharing this information quickly, is we didn't want states and we didn't want educators to have to worry about test takers unnecessarily test taking. So if a state had made the decision, they wanted to make sure students knew, teachers knew, so that teachers didn't know and say, well, we're still evaluating the recommendation, when they might know that the recommendation is to move forward with 145, and then that student, you know, because of something that they needed to do immediately, wanted to retest unnecessarily if they've already reached 145. So that's a key date. Obviously, we're sharing that information now. Another key date to keep on your radar is going to be around March 1st, or March 1st through about March 20th, about 3-week span or so. And so because we can't start and stop, that means we have to announce the information, and then we actually have to work on the back-end systems to make credentials and transcripts and all of the interfaces on their GED.com accounts be ready to function at the new performance levels with the new information. So on March 1, that is when the system implementation will go into effect. And so right now, if a student logs on to GED.com, and let's use Georgia as that example again, or a state like Minnesota, if they take the test today and they reach 145, they're considered passing on that particular test or across the battery if that's their last test. However, when they log on to GED.com to see their scores, it will tell them 145. There will be places where they can find information about the score changes, but technically when they look under the tab on their My Scores, it's going to say that they're not passing unless they've reached 150. So 150 and 170 are two score levels that will still be represented on GED.com. So we have an education challenge. And something that we need to do is make sure we educate educators, test takers, and as many people as possible to give the right information to test takers and let that test taker in, say, Georgia or Minnesota know that you have actually passed the test at 140. You do not need to retest. So that will help us do that, and that's why this staggering in terms of dates and then actually being able to implement things. Then the other key date is March 1st. Again, that's when the social studies item is going to be removed. The reason for the March 1st through 20th deadline is the data feeds will actually, the XML data feeds that come from GED Testing Service will be sent to the states on March 1st. Depending on how the state issues transcripts and credentials and the process that they go through and the vendor they may work with will depend on when they're available. And so if you're you may have an instance where you're in a state that uses a vendor, the data file goes on March 1, those transcripts and credentials may be ready by, say, March 4th. Or you may be in a state where it has to go to a state agency for verification for, say, a scholarship for post-secondary to make sure those folks are eligible, to get them on a list in the system. Then it gets checked and goes to a vendor. That may take an additional couple of weeks for those types of process to happen, so students wouldn't have access to their credentials necessarily, on that first week in March. It may take a few weeks. So obviously there are some states, every state was given these couple sets of recommendations. Every state is in a different stage of approvals of these recommendations, may need additional time for planning, etc., and couldn't move forward with the January 26th date of today. So here's just a smattering of those states that are in some form or fashion examining one of the recommendations, whether it's the 145, whether it's a retroactive scoring, and we're able to make those changes immediately. And so that information that we have from the states is available on the website at the bottom of the slide as well. And we will continue to update that. There's a one-page document that gives state-specific information. We'll continue to provide that information to you all. And then also you should be watching your email, listservs, things that are happening in your particular state for communications for information as soon as it's available from your state office about what your particular jurisdiction or state is going to be doing. Many of the states that were listed here at the top bullet, they do plan on moving forward with the recommendations, but there are approvals and there are timelines that they need to put things out for public comment, or rules need time to be changed if they're showing something at a 150 or have a requirement for some type of approval. And so many of them are looking at that March-April timeframe. Some may be extended beyond that, but again, look to the website and look to your state office for specific information on the timelines and where your specific state is at. So I did talk about students receiving emails about their status change, and they wouldn't see that necessarily reflected on GED.com, but on March 1, that is when that system change will happen. So it may take a bit of time, a few weeks, to actually have access to their transcripts and credentials through the state systems, but on GED.com, that's when the website will be updated. They'll see the 3 performance levels, and they'll see a passing status. We do know that in the interim, so if someone goes in, takes a test tomorrow in, say, Georgia or Minnesota, as I used those 2 examples earlier, we'll stick with those. If they took that test, they won't have immediate access to a transcript or credential if they pass the test at that time. So those transcripts and credentials will not be available until after that March 1st-ish time frame and a few weeks after that, they will get a formal email saying that they've met the requirements, they've passed the test, and for many people that will be good enough for the time being. However, for some people they will need some kind of formal verification for a scholarship or for a college entry or something along those lines. And there is a system in place for them. There's an email address where they would submit their name and their GED ID, and a verification letter will be mailed to them. And just one thing I wanted to point out here, if you're talking with test takers who you think are in any of these categories, it's always best course of action to tell them to log into GED.com on their myged.com account and make sure that their snail mail or physical address is updated. As things will be coming out, and if they're eligible for credentials newly, that will be sent to them in the mail, so it's really important that they have updated addresses on file. So GED Ready will have a little bit of a different implementation time frame. We wanted to make sure that people had access to some tools to predict and really give them a good guide about whether they're ready to pass the test at the 145 level in those states where that applies. And so starting today, when a student logs on to GED.com, they actually will see GED Ready score levels now represented at the 145 level. And so it also means that we are automatically updating those students' status. So if I took a GED Ready yesterday and I barely scored in the yellow, and when those things change today, now I'm scoring in the green. If I log on to my GED.com account, I will see that now I'm in the green. Students will also be notified if they have a status change, and it's a little bit of differentiation. So if you just took it recently, say the past 60 days or so, you'll get an email telling you had a status change and you may be ready to go take the test. Here's some information, talk to your teacher, whatever, but you're probably good to go. If they took a GED Ready, moved from yellow to green earlier than 60 days, let's say they did this last year and they have a status change, they'll still be notified they had a status change, but it will tell them that GED scores are most predictive if they take it and then take a test within 60 days. So they may be ready, but they probably want to talk to their ABE program or their teacher. They may want to take another GED Ready. They may want to do a couple things to make sure that they're ready to go sit for that test. But they will be notified. And just to provide a little bit of extra incentive for those that would be valuable for, we're doing a half-off GED Ready promotion, which will start February 1st and will run through March 31st. It's pretty straightforward, half off. The promo code on that it is PASS 2016, all caps on PASS, PASS 2016, or 2016, I should say. I had this question. We are working with publishers. We've discussed all the changes with them, including the elimination of the social studies ER. All of them are in the process of reviewing both their diagnostics, if they have one, and then also any type of practice test to determine if they need to make any scoring adjustments or any adjustments they may need to make in light of the new performance levels in the social studies elimination, social studies ER elimination. A couple quick things that I think are helpful for test takers. I'm sure there are other things, and there's an extensive FAQ for educators and for test takers on the website, as well as some additional resources. That infographic I showed you earlier, the news announcement, I'm trying to think, the technical documents, some logos, anything I think would be helpful. You can find that on that score-changes URL, which I'll flash up again here when we finish as well. So first and foremost, let's make sure and we keep people testing. They need access to the program. They're doing this for important reasons. We want to make sure and keep up momentum and not slow things, because as we know, anytime we slow momentum or have any kind of a cooling off effect with adult learners, sometimes that has detrimental consequences, and it's easy to kind of lose track. So we want to keep everyone on track. We want to make sure we keep up the momentum and we keep up testing. And then specifically, if you're in a state that's implementing the changes immediately, make sure that your test takers and folks in your program know about the 145 level and know that even on myged.com it may show the score at 150. reassure them that they will pass at 145 or they have passed at 145 if they've just taken a test, and not to retest unnecessarily. And then any students that you think could benefit from it, encourage them to take advantage of the GED Ready promotion starting February 1st as well. And then if you're in a state with delayed implementation or still in evaluation for approvals, be sure to watch the website. Be sure to be looking for information coming from your state office. And when providing counseling to test takers about whether to test or whether to wait, you all are in the best position to really understand each adult's situation, where they might be. 2 months down the road, if I tell them to wait, are they going to lose momentum and drop out? Are they really close to getting to 150? I want to keep them moving. Or are they far away from 150 and I think, I want to keep them warm and, whatever happens, if I'm in a state where it's going to be approved in March. Bottom line is, your adult learner's situation, but we want to make sure we keep people on track and we keep up the momentum. I can't stress that one enough. We're not encouraging anyone, whether you're in a state at 145 or you're in a state at 150, not to hold people because of the social studies elimination or ER elimination on 3-1. That's a long ways away, and so I want to keep people moving through the system and on track to earn that credential. Make sure you take a little bit of time to read the FAQs. They're a little bit long, but they're very straightforward. Simple Q, simple A. They're not extremely long. So I would say make sure you take the time to read the FAQs, both for the educators and for the test takers. If there's anything that's not on there, please make sure and let us know that we can add. And then also be watching that one web page that has state-specific information about what each state is going to be doing around both of these recommendations. And then additionally, on the GED College Ready Plus credit level, that program, while they'll be eligible starting immediately at 175, it will take a little bit of time for that to be implemented on the back end because the students will actually have access to a transcript or certificate should they want to submit to their institution. That really will kick off in early March. So be looking for that information, and we'll be adding more information to the FAQ specifically about that, that college credit level, which is exciting, but I think we probably have a lot of things to deal with and make sure we're communicating on the other two performance levels, especially around the passing score. So I would just say, we're very excited about this. We think these enhancements are a very positive step for the program and for adult learners specifically. And I just want to say thank you for everything that you all do for adult learners. I know it's not always the most glamorous thing, and the pay isn't always great. But thank you for everything you do for adult learners. We want to continue to work with you all as much as possible for that same end goal to make sure adult learners are successful and can really get to those goals that they've set up for themselves. And really prepare them for that. Utilize the website as much as possible, and then we'll continue to work with you all, take your feedback. We'll continue to work with state directors of adult education and GED administrators moving forward on anything else that we can do to enhance the program and improve the efficacy of the program for adult learners. Mimi?
Thank you, CT. There were a number of great questions that came in. One of them are regarding refunds and how would we handle situations where students have retested multiple times and are now requesting a refund for those additional attempts?
Sure. So I would say first off, we won't be doing refunds for a few reasons, but primarily because we do waive testing fees, and this will depend on the state, but we will waive testing fees for up to 2 free retakes per test subject or up to 8 across all 4 subjects. Any fees that students would have paid during that period would have been a state fee or test center compensation. And both of those things, as you obviously know, are not really under any kind of authority from GED Testing Service to wrangle any of those funds back or do anything along those lines. So we won't be doing refunds. And again, this is a new policy that we've implemented, and we think this is overwhelmingly this will be a net positive. And so, possibly tens of thousands of adults will be now eligible for a credential. They'll be one step closer to whatever they want to do next. So we think this is, still, this is going to be an overwhelmingly positive enhancement.
Okay, great. Another question we had was, will the scores for honor shift also? And does this apply to the Spanish GED test as well?
Yes to both. So GED with honors was previously at 170, and that's moved to 165, and it's being renamed GED College Ready. And then yes for Spanish.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Another great question that came in was, can you clarify whether or not the GED testing website has been updated with the performance level descriptors for all content areas on the website?
So there are about, I think last time I looked at the list, there were about 1,000 different web pages, PDFs, or documents on the GED Testing Service website that had information about the 150 and 170 level. I know many of those have been updated. I think we did a prioritization list. Many have been updated. Many of them are still left to be updated. But what I would say should be your kind of guidepost or your go-to resource or Bible, if you will, is that technical document. So if you log on to gedtestingservice.com educators score-change and you go to the right side menu, you will see something about performance standards, and it will say technical document attached to that. If you download that, there will be about 7 pages of information about the performance standard setting process. But the last bulk of that document, more than half of that document, are the actual performance level descriptors. And that's where I would send you to make sure you have the most up-to-date information about the PLDs related to the 145, 165, and 175 levels.
Okay, great. Another good question that came in was, can you tell us which states have already adopted the new scoring enhancements and which states have not adopted them, or if this is listed on the website?
Yeah, so we are working diligently with the states. This is all moving pretty quick. Again, it's not one of those things we could have planned for months and stopped testing and kind of started back up. So it's kind of a work in progress. In every state, it's kind of, things move daily. There are a couple states where thought the approvals were going to be quick. Someone was out of the office. There was a snow day, so it's going to be next week. And so as soon as we get that information from the states on both of those sets of recommendations, either the 145 or the retroactive credentialing or scoring, we will update that information on the ScoreChange website. There's a one-page state-specific there's a one web page that has state-specific information. We will keep that up to date as much as humanly possible on our side. And then again, I would just say keep your ears and your eyes open, so to speak, for any information that may be coming down from your state office about timelines or when something goes into effect.
There was another great question that came in, CT. Have you discussed potential credit articulation agreements that would bridge GED and the College Board CLEP exams?
I don't think that, I shouldn't say that. I am not aware of anything specifically with CLEP. I can talk with Marty about that and see if there's any information. I'll ask Mimi to collect the information of whoever asked that question, and we can get back to you on that. And just really quickly on the, I know there's probably a question about the credit recommendation. Again, that's coming out in early March, but the basics of that is that ACE College Credit Recommendation Service has been around for 40 years. ACE obviously is a pretty formidable organization, being sort of the coordinating umbrella organization representing all of higher ed. That program's been around for 40 years. Many institutions. I pulled a list just for one state of institutions that do something with the credit program, and 80% of their nonprofit institutions are involved somehow in the ACE credit program. So really what this is about education, just as we were doing with the original GED with honors, which is now 165 for bypassing remedial ed, and then also entering credit-bearing college courses. We'll be doing the same thing with ACE, with us, and hopefully with you all and GED administrators, state elected directors, to do some education at the institution, at the system level, to make sure that they know that this recommendation is out there, and to work with them on a process to start accepting these college credits and the 165 recommendation as well.
Okay, and it looks like we have run out of time here, unless there's anything else you saw that came in that you wanted to talk about, CT?
I didn't. If there were a lot of questions, there's one more question. I think folks would probably hang on for that if there's something out there.
Okay, and please keep in mind that most of your questions can be answered on gedtestingservice.com/score/change, or feel free to email any of the questions to communications@gedtestingservice.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and this concludes the webinar.
Thank you.